What happens when the nation's most sensitive military secrets aren't guarded in the war room but instead dropped into a casual group chat? That's the explosive allegation swirling around Pete Hegseth, a figure who's now facing intense scrutiny for allegedly leaking classified launch times for F-18 combat missions on an unsecured messaging app. This wasn't some harmless tidbit of trivia. We're talking about fighter jets flying over enemy territory, into the path of anti-aircraft missiles, with their exact launch time allegedly typed out for anyone in that chat to see.
This is a gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, I'd like to clarify a few important details for the record. When you texted the launch time for F-18s going into combat over enemy territory facing anti-aircraft missiles on an unclassified signal chat, did that launch time come from Central Command, yes or no?
I know what you're referring to, and there were no
It's a very simple question. Did it come from? It's a very simple
or,
question. Did it come from Central Command?
Well, in this committee, no way in which I communicate or what I communicate on a successful strike is something that I would share.
So you can't even identify the combatant command under which this operation occurred?
Well, everybody knows the
Okay, so everyone knows it's Central Command. So when Central Command sent you this information, did they send it on a classified system or an unclassified system?
Well, as you know, having served yourself, any way that the Secretary of Defense communicates or provides information in and of itself is classified and not to be discussed.
So what was the classification marking of the launch time when it was sent to you? Because DoD regulations require information on classified systems to be marked.
What was the classification mark time?
Yeah, what was the classification marking? Because
again, classifications of any information in an ongoing operation that was successful are not things that would be disclosed in a public forum.
You can very well disclose whether or not it was classified. It's not classified to disclose whether or not it was classified. And in fact, DoD regulations state that any classified information has to be labeled with its classification. Was it classified secret or top secret?
What's not classified is that it was an incredibly successful mission against the Houthis.
Okay, so it was classified. So are you trying to say that the information was unclassified?
I'm not trying to say anything.
Okay, that's what I thought. You're not saying that. So you took classified information from Central Command that had a classification marking on it, because that's what's required by DoD regulations, and you put it on an unclassified system. So we're going to get a report in a few days from the DoD Inspector General. And if the DoD Inspector General finds what is pretty obvious, both to you smiling there in the witness seat and to all of us up here, that the information was, in fact, classified, do you plan to take any accountability for that?
As I pointed out at the time—
you said that accountability is back. Does that not apply to you?
As I said at the time, Congressman, there were no names, targets, locations, units, routes, sources, methods, no classified information.
Okay, so if it comes back that it is classified, will you take accountability or not? You've already admitted that it was classified because everything you get from CENTCOM is classified. You just explained that to me. That's how you justified not answering the question.
Not what I said. I didn't confirm any classification or
Okay, so if it is
what
confirmed,
I know is that
will you take
everything
accountability?
I share, everything I talk about—
Mr. Secretary, does accountability apply to you or not?
—is classified whether I talk or not.
Does it apply to you or not?
Does what apply to me or not?
Accountability. You said accountability is back at the Secretary.
And you know what? The Houthis were held accountable for shooting at our
I'm just asking if it applies to you.
very successfully.
I'm not asking about the
previous
Houthis.
administration let our ships get shot at, and nothing was done about it. And thankfully, because of the skill and courage of our troops on the battlefield,
asking about
we
I reclaim my
actually put them
time.
in a place
I
where
reclaim my
they
time.
called for a ceasefire.
I claim my time. I'm just asking if accountability applies to you. It's a very simple question. We use leadership by example.
Of course. Unlike, I serve at the pleasure of the president like everybody else does.
So it only applies to the president, not to you.
I serve at the pleasure—
You talked about the success of the Houthi operation. About how much money did it cost? How much money did you spend on missiles shooting at the Houthis?
Well, you'd have to compare that with what it cost.
I'm just asking how much did it cost?
Divert our shipping lanes around—
I'm told it's several $100 million, maybe close to $1 billion. How many U.S.-flagged commercial ships have transited the Red Sea since your so-called successful operation?
Well, thankfully, unlike the previous administration—
The answer is zero.
military vessels transit.
No, I
around
didn't ask
just
about
this
military
week.
vessels. I
Well, which
asked
would
about
be the
commercial
precursor
vessels.
for
How many
civilian and
commercial vessels? It's
transit,
been several
thankfully.
weeks. How many commercial vessels, U.S. flagged, have
Well,
transited the
would
Red Sea?
you, Mr. Congressman, put civilian ships
The
through
questions
dam
are not to
before
me,
military
Mr. Secretary,
ships?
they're to you.
We have responsibly put military
The answer
ships
is zero.
through first.
I reclaim my time. How many generals and admirals have you fired?
I don't know the exact number, but
You don't know the number. It's 8. Can you explain why any of them were fired? Like, just explain why was...
they all serve at the pleasure of the president. And I think
No, I'm just asking you why.
General Kane is a great example.
I'm just
of
asking
a
you
leader
why.
that we
And
need
you
at
probably
this
learned
time.
at Princeton what why means. Why did you fire him?
They serve at the pleasure of the president, and we
Why
want better
did you
representation
fire
in
him?
each and every of those.
You can't
each and
explain
every
why
one
you
of those
fired any of
places.
them?
Gentlemen's time's expired. Chair, and I
Congressman Seth Moulton confronted Hegseth in a hearing, demanding direct answers. What unfolded wasn't clarity. It was a masterclass in dodging, deflecting, and sidestepping responsibility. And the more you look at this exchange, the more it raises questions, not just about Hegseth, but about accountability, political privilege, and whether national security is being treated like a prop for cable news talking points. The confrontation started with a simple yes or no question. Moulton wanted to know if the launch time Hegseth posted came directly from Central Command. A straightforward query, but instead of answering, Hegseth pivoted. He avoided giving a direct confirmation, citing vague rules about what could or couldn't be shared in a public forum. The room could feel the tension, Moulton pressing harder, Hegseth digging in. The question hung there: did the information come from the very heart of the Pentagon's operational hub? The fact that Hegseth wouldn't give a straight answer only made the situation feel more suspicious. This wasn't just some idle curiosity. The launch time wasn't for a training exercise or a ceremonial flyover. It was for real combat. Hegseth 18S heading over hostile territory, in range of enemy air defenses. Operational details like this are usually locked behind top-secret walls for good reason. Leaking them, intentionally or not, could risk lives in the air and compromise the mission on the ground. So the natural question becomes, who fed Hegseth this intel? And why was it ending up on an unclassified, unsecured messaging platform? Moulton pushed for more specifics, asking if the data came through a classified or unclassified system. It's a critical distinction, because Department of Defense regulations make it clear any classified material must be marked with its proper level, secret, top secret, or higher. But again, no straight answer. Instead, Hegseth dodged the question, implying that anything he communicates as Secretary of Defense would be inherently sensitive, without actually confirming the classification. It was a verbal sidestep, one that left the most important detail hanging in the air. At this point, Moulton zeroed in on accountability. If the upcoming Department of Defense Inspector General's report confirmed that the launch time was indeed classified, would Hegseth take responsibility? This was the moment for a clear commitment, but instead the conversation swerved. Hegseth began talking about the success of the mission, framing it as a win against the Houthis, and never actually acknowledging whether the leak had occurred or whether accountability applied to him. For anyone watching, the lack of a direct answer was glaring. And here's where the hypocrisy starts to show. If a junior officer or enlisted service member had leaked details like this, the hammer would fall immediately. Court-martial, career over, possibly prison. But when it's a politically connected media figure who also happens to hold a powerful position, suddenly the urgency disappears, the consequences evaporate, and the rules seem to bend. Moulton called out that double standard in real time, asking point-blank if accountability applied to Hegseth personally. The back and forth that followed was telling. Instead of a yes or no, Hegseth danced around the question, eventually falling back on the idea that he serves at the pleasure of the president, as if that absolved him of personal responsibility. And while this was playing out, Moulton shifted the focus to something equally troubling: the money trail. The campaign against the Houthis, according to his figures, had already cost several $100 million, possibly close to $1 billion. That's a staggering sum by any measure, and yet after all this firepower, after all these so-called successful strikes, not a single U.S.-flagged commercial ship had sailed through the Red Sea since the operation began. The implication was clear: the strategic goal hadn't been met despite the massive price tag. The public hears mission success, but the reality looks more like an expensive show of force without tangible results. Hegseth tried to draw comparisons to previous administrations, claiming they'd let ships be attacked without response. But that argument did little to address the glaring fact that in this case, shipping lanes were still frozen. The Houthis remained a threat, and the Red Sea was still essentially off-limits for American commerce. The optics of spending nearly $1 billion for zero movement and shipping safety were hard to ignore. From there, Moulton went for another pressure point: leadership accountability. How many generals and admirals had been fired during this campaign? Hegseth couldn't give an exact number at first, then seemed to acknowledge it was 8. But when asked why those firings happened, he fell back into the same vague territory, saying they serve at the pleasure of the president, talking about wanting better representation, but offering no concrete reasons. The audience was left wondering whether these decisions were strategic, political, or simply reactive. The exchange highlighted a brutal truth: when failures happen at the highest levels, accountability often stops short of the people in charge. Lower ranks take the fall, while the decision-makers deflect and survive. For the public, this kind of evasiveness breeds distrust. If the rules don't apply equally to everyone, what does that say about the integrity of our national security system? And that's the real heart of this story. It's not just about whether a single launch time was leaked. It's about the broader culture of selective accountability, where some individuals seem shielded from the consequences of their actions. It's about whether national security information is treated with the seriousness it deserves, or repurposed as a talking point to score media exposure. And it's about the taxpayers whose dollars fund these operations, being left in the dark about whether those dollars are achieving anything beyond political theater. The tension in that hearing room wasn't just about one man dodging questions, it was about the implications of those dodges. If classified material was mishandled, if hundreds of millions were spent with no strategic gain, if leaders at the top can't explain their own decisions, what does that mean for the trust between the military, the government, and the public? Moulton's persistence in pressing Hegseth revealed something important. Even when confronted directly, some leaders have mastered the art of non-answer. And while that might be politically safe in the short term, it erodes the public's confidence in the long run. People don't just want to hear that a mission was successful, they want to know what that success cost, what it achieved, and whether it was worth the risks taken. This story is more than a clash between a congressman and a secretary. It's a snapshot of the larger struggle over transparency, accountability, and the way power operates behind the scenes. When sensitive information becomes political ammunition, when billions are spent without measurable results, and when leaders can't or won't explain their actions, the consequences ripple far beyond the headlines. So now the question turns to the viewers. If a lower-ranking officer would face immediate punishment for leaking classified information, should someone in Hegseth's position be held to the same standard? If an operation burns through close to $1 billion without securing the intended result, should there be consequences at the top? Or is this just another case where the elites get to rewrite the rules in real time, leaving the public to foot the bill and live with the fallout? In the coming days, the Inspector General's report might shed light on whether the information in question was indeed classified. But the outcome of that report will be telling, not just for Hegseth, but for the system as a whole. If it confirms what many suspect, the pressure for accountability will be impossible to ignore. If it's brushed aside, it will send yet another message that those with the right connections play by a different set of rules. And while Washington debates, the rest of us are left to wonder who really protects national security. Is it the service members who follow protocol to the letter, or the media figures who treat sensitive intel like casual conversation fodder? The stakes couldn't be higher, because the precedent set here won't just affect this one incident. It will shape how future breaches are handled, and whether the public can trust the people charged with keeping the nation safe. This isn't a partisan issue. It's not about left versus right, Democrat versus Republican. It's about whether the rules of national security mean the same thing for everyone, or whether they only apply when convenient. And if the answer to that question is the latter, then we have a much bigger problem than one controversial chat message. So what do you think? Should a figure like Pete Hegseth face the same scrutiny and potential consequences as anyone else in the chain of command? Or will this end the way too many scandals in Washington do, with a shrug, a spin, and no real change? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button, because the next story we're covering takes this controversy to a whole new level.